Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
The book show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's book show. We will start by looking at the bestseller lists on Amazon.co.uk and the Sunday Times, the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK. There's quite a few new entries this week. Then we'll be chatting to Jim Eldridge. He was born in central London towards the end of World War II and survived attacks by V-2 rockets on the King's Cross area where he lived. In 1971, he sold his first sitcom to the BBC and had his first book commissioned. Since then, he's had more than 100 books published with sales of over 3 million copies. Murder at St Paul's Cathedral is book one in his new Cathedral Mysteries Series, which will explore crimes in notable UK cathedrals during World War II. This book follows Inspector Coburg and Sergeant Lampson as they unravel a mysterious murder committed against a senior chorister. I'm also chatting to Douglas Jackson, the author of 20 historical mystery thrillers, including the critically acclaimed 9-book Hero of Rome series. Blood Vengeance is the gripping third installment in the Warsaw Quartet, where the body of a beautiful, well-connected Polish SOE agent is found in the gardens of a country house in Scotland. And we're joined by James Salzer, who was an intensive English major at Yale, worked in television for a number of years, then moved with his family to the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts. In his early years on the island, he laboured as a commercial scalloper, which inspired a big part of the story in his novel. All That Smoulders is his first murder mystery and written in honour of his mother, who was a big Agatha Christie fan. Just the first hour. In the second hour, we're chatting to S.J. Bennett, Hole Gadaray, Gavin Taylor and Rashmi Surdeshpande.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's book show. We start by looking at the Sunday Times bestseller list. This is the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK and the one that every author wants to be on. It's the most accurate estimation of book sales in the country. So Emily Bronte's classic novel charts twice this week. It's the #1 fiction paperback and it sneaks into the hardback list too. The Bronte estate may be pleased that Emerald Fennell's film veers so far from the book, as it means there are practically no spoilers. In non-fiction, Giselle Pellicot's memoir of her horrific abuse at the hands of her husband takes a very worthy #1 spot. So let's start with general hardbacks. 4 new entries this week, including #1, A Hymn to Life by Giselle Pellicot. The author recounts her life story before and after the sexual abuse at her husband's hands. #2 is Nobody's Girl by Virginia Roberts Gouffre. #3, Always Remember by Charlie Mackesy. Number 4 is Entitled by Andrew Lowney. #5 is a new entry called How to Launder Money by George Cattrall and Lawrence Burke Files. How anti-money laundering laws are failing to stop the majority of related crimes. #6, a new entry called All of My Days by Kerry Cunningham. Poems on motherhood from the early days to preparing for school and beyond. #7 is The Little Things in Life by Catherine Hapka and Mike Wall. #8, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. #10, Lessons from a Default Parent by Lou Beckett. And #10 is the final new entry, Dear England by Gareth Southgate, Lessons on Leadership from the former England men's football manager. Moving on to fiction hardbacks, 5 new entries this week, including #1, Half City by Kate Golden. After her father's death, a woman enrolls in an academy for demon hunters. Number 2, a new entry called Direbound by Sable Sorensen. To save her sister, a woman enlists in an army where warriors are bound to dire wolves. Number 3 is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Number 4, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Number 6, Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. Number 6 is a new entry called Agnes Obert's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. A woman discovers her cat rescue charity is being used to conceal a magician's lair. Number 7, One Woman's War by Rosie Goodwin. Number 8, a new entry called Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. In a divided land, a young man is thrust headfirst into a centuries-long war. Number 9 is The Killing Time by Ellie Griffiths. And number 10 is the final new entry, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. On the Yorkshire moors, a dangerous love leads to betrayal and revenge. Even though it was published many, many moons ago, it is the first time that it's in the Sunday Times bestseller charts. Moving on to bestsellers on Amazon.co.uk, there are a few classics up there this week. It is World Book Day in the UK, so that's the connection. Number 1 is Matilda by Roald Dahl. Number 2, The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Number 3, Want to Know a Secret by Frida McFadden, which I'm reading currently. Number 4, The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. Number 5, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. Number 6 is The Women by Kristin Hanna. Number 7, A Batch from Scratch by Suzanne Mulholland. Number 8 is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Number 9, Clean Magic by Nancy Birtwistle. And number 10 is Fluffy Chick, an Easter touch and feel book by Rod Campbell.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray. The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Jim Eldridge. He was born in central London towards the end of World War II and survived attacks by V-2 rockets on the King's Cross area where he lived. In 1971, he sold his first sitcom to the BBC and had his first book commissioned. Since then, he's had more than 100 books published with sales of over 3 million copies. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his latest novel, Murder at St. Paul's Cathedral. It is book 1 of a new series called Cathedral Mysteries. In the series, he explores crimes in notable UK cathedrals during World War II, tapping into our perennial fascination with these landmarks. This book, Murder at St. Paul's Cathedral, follows Inspector Coburg and Sergeant Lampson as they unravel a mysterious murder committed against a senior chorister. Welcome to the Book Show, Jim.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Hannah. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. And there's so much I want to ask you. First of all, I mean, I'm sure you don't remember much, if anything, about it. You're obviously very young, but being around when towards the end of World War II, I mean, you must have done a bit of research into what happened, have you?
I did. I have to say, you know, although I've said before, I was blown up by V2 because I was in the part of London I lived. I have no recollection of it at all. I slept all through it. My sister, my elder sister, was the one who told me about it because she was pushing my pram when the blast went off and took me some distance.
Wow. Gosh, unbelievable. Thank goodness you're both okay and also
Absolutely.
Don't remember it, I guess. And tell me about the sitcom that you wrote.
Oh, well, this was 1971, and it was for, at the time, BBC Radio. I was delighted to hear you were doing this because I have always had a love of radio. Mm-hmm. And this was, say, 1971. It was a sitcom called Parsley Sidings, starring Arthur Lowe. Do you remember Arthur Lowe?
Yes, absolutely.
Arthur Lowe, Kenneth Connor, Ian Lavender, and Liz Fraser. So I wrote that. That was my first. We did 2 series of it, so 21 shows, and then I went on to do more. In all, I calculate I've had 250 radio scripts broadcast.
Wow.
And 250 television scripts broadcast. So
That's
it's
amazing.
been busy.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. So what's the difference between writing for TV and radio and then writing books? I mean, all very different, I should imagine.
They are. But you learn the difference because on the... the book that I sold in 1971 was a thriller. And then I did the radio adaptation a few years later. Luckily, I'd been working as a scriptwriter for radio, so I knew the difference. They're all very, very different techniques. And also you learn when you're writing, it's very different writing studio TV shows for comedy and those that are filmed, because I've also worked on film. So you really just learn as you go along. Which has been great. I mean, I've been very, very lucky to have worked with some great people and learnt from them. And the main thing is, what keeps you working is, if your show does well, then you get another one. Mm-hmm. You know, so it kept me going for 40 years as a scriptwriter.
Great. And when you have an idea for a story, do you need to think before you write it, okay, this would work best on radio, or this would make a great novel, or this would work for television? Do you need to obviously think that before you start?
Yeah, absolutely right, Hannah. That is true. But in this case, what happened was, after I decided the nature of television scriptwriting had changed, the television and film, big time, because you had suddenly, when I first started, there was only BBC One and ITV One. You didn't even have Channel 4. Mm-hmm. You know, so it was very simple. Now, of course, it's all changed because you're writing internationally for people like Netflix and other companies. And I realised the other thing is that most of the people I'd worked with, because I'm certainly, as they describe it, of a certain age, and I thought to myself, most of the people, the producers and directors, and many of the cast that I've worked with, have retired or in some cases fallen off the perch. So I think this is now time to me to go elsewhere. Yeah. And that's hence the books. Yeah. So now if I get a new idea, I'm definitely thinking of it in book form. Because it is a very, very different world out there on television now. Yeah,
no, fair enough. So with this new book then, how come you decided that it was going to be the first in a series?
Well, it's not actually. It looks like that because it's the Cathedral Mysteries. But basically what happened was I had a series out called The Museum Mysteries, which I did for this publisher. And then after a few of those, they asked me if I had another idea. And so I came up with this story, this character, Coburg, set in World War II. Now, while doing that, the first one were set in luxury hotels. So you had like Murder at the Ritz, Murder at the Claridge's, Murder at the Savoy. And then after that, we had a discussion about the same characters. It's still in World War II, but in London abandoned underground stations, because certainly in the war, many of them have been turned into air raid shelters. So I did those. I did a few more, and then they said to me, we'd quite like to have a different take on this. Cathedrals. So I said, what an excellent idea. You know, so, and the first one that came up was St. Paul's Cathedral. So, you know, it was definitely fun to do, because it's such an iconic thing. And I was inspired by the famous photograph of the Dome of St. Paul's in the Blitz, because it was heavily attacked. And so that's where the story came from. Yeah. Very much.
And I mean, you've obviously got loads of ideas to keep writing these sort of similar style, but in the various different settings around London or the UK or Europe, as you've done. Where do you get, have you got like a book of ideas or?
No, I'm quite lucky. And I tell you in a way, my grounding like all those years ago as a scriptwriter, both for radio and television, especially if you're doing a series, either a comedy, a sitcom, or a drama series, you have to come up with a new idea, a new plot every week. So I learnt really how to take an existing situation and then develop it. So each time you're coming up with new characters. And then I was very lucky because those series succeeded. So producers would say to me, "What else have you got, Jim?" We were interested. And to get an opportunity like that, and by then I had known certain actors, certain cast year, and I'd think this would be great for them. So really, I actually am a great believer in that the ideas are all out there, really. As I've been doing it for so long, I'm sure that I'm very, touch wood, I'm very lucky. I've never had writer's block.
Oh, that's great.
Because it's a question of, mainly because a contract is issued, and you know how it works. You get a contract, you get the signature fee, then you get the delivery fee, and then the production fee when it goes in. And so, in other words, if you don't do the work, you don't get paid. And as a freelance, that is the crucial thing.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's always a question of sitting down and coming up and saying, what can we do with it this week? Or what can we do this time? Or if it's a new series, what are we looking at? So I've been doing it as a job for a long time. And therefore, I don't think it's any different if I was, say, like a carpenter or something. If you do something for so many years, you get relatively good at it.
Fair enough. So tell us about your main characters then that, as you say, have featured in many other books before. Well,
in the St. Paul's, this is the main character is Detective Chief Inspector Edgar Sachs-Coburg. And I had this idea because, as you know, the British royal family were originally called Saxe-Coburg-Gotha.
Yeah.
And what I thought would be quite interesting to get the contrast to make the hero, if you like, Coburg, Saxe-Coburg, coming from an aristocratic family. His elder brother is Earl of Dawlish. He went to Eton, and there's obviously the suggestion that he's come up through the aristocracy. But after he left Eton, he went straight into the First World War trenches and was badly injured. Now, he is partnered with a detective sergeant called Ted Lampson, who lives in Somers Town. Now, most people don't know Somers Town. I was born and brought up in Camden Town, which is a very, very poor, disadvantaged area in the 1940s and 50s. Having said that, by the time the 60s and 70s came on, it was a very upmarket area. But Somers Town was even poorer than Camden Town. So you've got Ted Lampson, the sergeant, and Coburg, and they get on, they are a team. But they obviously come from completely and utterly different backgrounds, and that quite interested me.
Yeah.
And so you have, and the whole idea, every now and then, when Edgar first meets a new person, especially if it's king, in the first book, which is Murder at the Ritz, he meets King Zog of Albania, who, despite the name, was a real person. And King Zog says to him, when he says about Saxe-Coburg, and he says, you are a member of the royal family. And he says, no, the royal family were Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. They're now Windsor. My family are just Saxe-Coburg. And he says, but surely you're related. So he always has this thing where a lot of people think he's related to royalty, including once in one of the books where he actually meets the king, King George, who asks him the same question. So it was an interesting character to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. So without giving too much away, can you tell us a bit about what happens in this book then, Murder at St. Paul's Cathedral?
Yes, certainly. It starts off St. Paul's Cathedral. It was interesting because during the war, the choir stayed, but the choir school with the children in it were moved down to Devon. So you just had a handful of choristers. Now, what happens is that one of them is found beaten to death, and in the priory, of the cathedral. Hence, Coburg and Lampson are brought in to investigate. But what they discover that there is more going on than just rivalries or personalities in the choir. There's a lot of it relates to chess and Bletchley. Bletchley was the place where Alan Turing and others did the whole secrecy thing to break the codes. And so they're embroiled in that as well, which is quite something. And at the same time, Coburg is married to a jazz singer called Rosa Weeks, and she does appearances on radio and stuff like this. And here I wanted to use my experience of two things, radio and also film, because I did work at the famous Ealing Studios when I was a scriptwriter.
Oh, wow.
Which was fascinating to me. And I also worked at the well-known Maid of Vale radio studios. So Rosa gets involved in a murder case that involves her, appearing both at Maid of Vale, but then at the Ealing Film Studios. And having worked at Ealing, it was a place I knew.
Yeah.
And so it was quite nice to bring in that as well.
Yeah. And are you a planner, Jim? Did you kind of plan the story beforehand? Did you know exactly where you were taking the characters?
No, I plan each book. But the one thing I learned, you never know what's going to come up. So, because the longest series I've ever done, I did a Radio 4 series called King Street Junior, which ran for 20 years, 100 episodes. And what I as that went through, you can come up with the plot for the first series, but you don't know who's going to pop up who may suddenly be very good, who you want to include them in. Or, especially when you're script writing, you don't know when someone's going to leave. Because I've had situations, literally, where I was about to start a series, and the star left because he wanted to go and do some films in Hollywood, which I can totally understand. But it meant, therefore, rewriting and doing some of the scripts on that series differently. Yeah. So you can't project on too much because you never know what's going to happen.
No, fair enough. And Jim, have you ever thought about writing your own stories as a memoir or autobiography? You've obviously had a fascinating life.
No, I've not considered that.
No?
I've had various people suggest it. But my point is, I suppose, I am not what I would call a name, a celebrity or famous. Whereas most autobiographies or biographies, you mentioned George Clooney, who, from Marbella. Now, a book with a photograph of George Clooney on it and his name, that is going to sell. But Jim Eldridge, only a certain niche lot of people who have read the books or seen the TV shows or that, most people don't know who wrote a script.
That's why you should tell them.
Which is interesting. So, no, I really honestly couldn't see there being a lot of interest in a book about Jim Eldridge.
Fair enough. I think
I've used various things in my life in the scripts.
Yeah, okay.
So that's better for me.
Well, if people want to get a copy of Murder at St. Paul's Cathedral, book 1 of the Cathedral Mysteries series, it's out now. It's available wherever you get your books from, either online or your local bookshop. And it is by Jim Eldridge, who we've been chatting with. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to chat with you.
Hannah, thank you so much. You've been very kind.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Douglas Jackson. He's the author of 20 historical novels and mystery thrillers, including the critically acclaimed 9-book Hero of Rome series. Originally a journalist by profession, he rose to become assistant editor of The Scotsman before leaving to be a full-time writer in 2009. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his new novel, Blood Vengeance. It's the gripping third installment in the Warsaw Quartet. Welcome to the Book Show, Douglas.
Thanks, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. So I want to ask you about your kind of transition from being a journalist to a novelist. How did that happen?
Well, I'd been working in newspapers for 36 years and I was becoming terribly bored with the same news coming around, the news cycle basically just repeated itself. And I wasn't enjoying the job, but I had a lunch with a friend of mine called Nicola Barry, and she was doing an MLit course at Glasgow University, which quite a few well-known writers have graduated from. And just during the lunch, she says, Dougie, I think you should write a novel. I bet it would be really gritty. And I just thought, yeah. So I went home that night and I wrote 500 words, and I've basically been writing ever since. That's 20 odd years. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And how would you describe, I mean, it might sound obvious, but the difference between journalism and writing articles and news compared to writing books and novels?
It's a joy to write books.
Nice.
No, I was on the production side of things in newspapers. So, basically, I wrote headlines and drew pages and that sort of things, and I organised the production of the paper. But yeah, there's a freedom in writing books. You're making a living from your imagination, and the only idiot you're working for is yourself, which is very, very nice, actually.
Yeah, I bet. So before we talk about the new book, I just wanted to ask you about the Hero of Rome series, 9 books. When you started, did you plan that it was going to go on for nine books?
Absolutely not. I'd written 2 books called Caligula and Claudius, and I'd planned to write a 3rd book in that series, but my then editor, they decided to pull the plug on these books. But he said, look, if you can come up with an idea for a trilogy, we'll offer you a 3-book deal. So I went home that night, and the 3rd book in the Caligula Claudius sort of progression was going to feature the Boudican Rebellion, and the last stand in the Temple of Claudius at Colchester. So I just sort of I created a new character, and I put him at the heart of that story. And I asked Simon, my then editor, I said, what about titles? And he said, anything with Rome in the title is doing well at the moment. So Hero of Rome was born, and I needed 2 titles for another 2 books. So I just put, Hero, Defender, Avenger. So I came up with the 3 titles. I had no idea whatsoever I was going to write this 2nd and 3rd book about. But Defender of Rome it was a natural progression for me. And then Avenger of Rome took Valerius back into the army again, which people really enjoyed, having him as part of the legions. And that 3-book deal opened up another 3-book deal. I had no idea what was going to happen with them either. And it just progressed from there. But I'd always hoped that the series would end in Scotland at the Battle of Mons Gropius, which is basically home ground for me. And I was really pleased when I managed to you do that in the final book of the series, Hammer of Rome.
Yeah, nice. And when you're writing a series, I guess it's nice to already have the characters there in place that you can constantly be developing.
Absolutely. One of the things I'm proudest of is with the Valerius series is that Valerius starts off as a sort of very green young officer who really enjoys soldiering for the sake of it, but he's quite naive. And he develops as a character. He becomes stronger and more confident over the books, and he becomes more mature. And just the sort of natural progression of life, really. And he faces up to all sorts of new challenges. It was good to be able to do that. And the wonderful thing about it is, after a couple of books, you've got a background, you've got a life for him. And you can refer to that life, and the way he reacts to things is quite natural, because you've got the background and the foundation there.
Yeah. And you're obviously really interested and passionate about history. Do you know where that comes from? Yeah,
I was brought up in a town in the borders called Scottish borders called Jedburgh, and Jedburgh is it's a town that's filled with history. It's got a 12th century abbey, a ruined abbey that was burned down by the English 5 times. It's got a castle, which a prison. It was a Victorian prison, but previously that was one of Robert the Bruce's castles. And there's history around every corner, basically. Yeah. So when I was walking to school, I would pass history everywhere.
Yeah.
And then when I left school at 15. And a friend of mine got me a job as on what was called then a youth opportunities scheme. And it was actually restoring a Roman marching camp in the Cheviot Hills just south of Jedburgh. And so that basically put you in the ground as if you were a legionary, because what they did with these marching camps is that they created them from turf. And every night they would go and they would build a new marching camp. So our job was to put the turf back in the ground again, basically, because it had been ploughed up by the Forestry Commission. And I just remember being there, and there's a road called Deer Street that passes right by the Roman fort, and there's a cleft in the hills just above it. And I just remember being there at night, and it's like or in the evening, and the hairs standing on the back of my neck when I was thinking, I wonder what it was like when the first Scottish people saw a Roman legion marching down that road. It just blew me away. So I think that's where it all came from, I think.
Interesting. And looking at the new book then, the 3rd installment in the Warsaw Quartet, tell us about the series first of all.
The series features a Warsaw detective called Jan Kalisz, who at the start of the books, he's in hospital recovering from his wounds, which were incurred in the defence of Warsaw in 1939. And a stranger comes to visit him in the middle of the night. And by now it's become clear that Poland is defeated and that Warsaw will fall within the next few days. And this stranger comes in and persuades him to stay in his position as a police detective when the Germans take over. And he's very reluctant to do this because he's a patriot. He wants to continue the fight. But eventually the guy persuades him that he's doing his best for the country if he does that, working for the Germans and working for the resistance at the same time. And not even his wife and family can know about it. It will only be him and this person, single person will be his contact. And that's what he does. And basically he goes back to work. But the Germans at that point, they demoted everybody. They sacked all the Polish detectives. But eventually they realised that they couldn't work without, the cooperation of the Polish police force, and a lot of them were reinstated. So Jan Kallis eventually is reinstated, and every day he has to work with the Germans, and every day he's a target for the people in the resistance, because they don't know that he's not a collaborator. Mm-hmm. And Warsaw at this point, it was hell on earth, because there were roundups. There were the Nazis. Basically, they walked in and they closed the universities, they closed the schools, they arrested all the faculties and sent them to concentration camps. They rounded up intellectuals and just hustled them off and shot them. Tens, hundreds of thousands of people. So it's a very difficult time to be in Warsaw, which is great for the novelist, obviously.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more as to what happens in this book, Book 3, Blood Vengeance.
Well, Book 3 is a kind of different. I mean, Book 1 was quite dark. He gets involved in the hunt for an awful serial killer called the Artist. And then in Book 2, I mean, these books are very dark. Book 2 was even darker because he ended up in the Warsaw Ghetto when it was being liquidated. And it's a very moving, poignant book. But I'd originally planned for all the books to be set in Warsaw. But I had this... When I was doing research a few years back, I found this... just a single paragraph in a local newspaper in the West Highlands of Scotland. And it said that a Polish servicewoman had been found in mysterious or unexplained circumstances on the foreshore at Arisaig. Now, I knew that Arisaig was where the Special Operations Executive had trained during the war. This was in 1941 she was found, or 1942. And, who was she? What was she doing there? She probably had something to do with the SOE. And how did she die? And I always thought that there was a book in that somewhere. So I decided that to bring Jan Kallis away from to Warsaw and have him basically investigate this woman's death. The premise is that this SOE secret agent is a friend of General Sikorsky's daughter. She was a bridesmaid at General Sikorsky's daughter's wedding. And General Sikorsky and the daughter died a few months before this book starts in a mysterious plane accident off Gibraltar. So when this connected SOE agent is found dead, it could be the final nail in the coffin of the alliance. The Poles are already up in arms because they think it's possible that Stalin killed Sikorsky. It's possible that there was Polish rivalries involved, and it was also possible that Winston Churchill was involved. So this is a bad time for this death to happen. Mm. So what happens is they bring Jan Kallis from Warsaw to Scotland to investigate in this place where everybody within 10 miles is a trained killer, basically. So it could have been anybody. And it's only once it gets there he finds there not been one murder, but there are two murders. So.
And are any of the characters in your book real people based on real scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when he comes across, I mean, the biggest problem that I had was justifying bringing Kallis from Warsaw. There had to be a proper motivation for that. And what happens is that Winston Churchill is involved in bringing him in. Okay. Without Churchill, it probably wouldn't have happened. So I had to get it at a high level. So Churchill features. There's a guy called Gavin Maxwell who wrote the book A Ring of Bright Water.
Okay.
And he was an SOE trainer at RSA during the war, so he features in it. and there's quite a few others as well. A guy called Bill Sykes, who was a very famous SOE trainer as well. His party trick was to somersault down a staircase, land on his feet, and with his pistol out, ready to shoot anybody. So I mean, and he and his partner, a guy called Fairbairn, created what was called the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife, which is basically that fancy knife that the commandos carried through the war. A very deadly weapon. Yeah. So they're the main real people involved in it. Yeah.
It must be nice, I guess, blending fictional characters with real people, the likes of Churchill and things. I guess it brings the story to life that much more and makes it feel that much more realistic.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's nice to drop your characters in amongst the big beasts, as it were, and that's what I liked about the Hero of Rome series as well. Is that Valerius I was fortunate in that I created a situation where he was able to sort of move between the social strata. And so he mixes with emperors and emperors and soldiers alike, and politicians, and so it's good. The likes of the Emperor Titus, the Emperor Vespasian, and Nero was one of my favourites. A very bad man.
Well, if people want to get a copy of Blood Vengeance, it's out now. It's available wherever you get your books from, either online or your local bookshop. And it's by Douglas Jackson, who we've been chatting with. Douglas, thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you very much, Hannah. It's been a pleasure.
The Book Programme, presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is James Salzer. He was an intensive English major at Yale, worked in television for a number of years, then moved with his family year-round to the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts. In his early years on the island, he laboured as a commercial scalloper and sang professionally in a barbershop quartet. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his new novel, All That Smoulders. It's actually his first murder mystery and is written in honour of his mother, who was a big fan of Agatha Christie. There is a backstory for his protagonist that places him as one of Christie's relatives. Welcome to the Book Show, James.
Thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you.
It's lovely to have you with us. And I have to ask you about your time in television, first of all. What was that like? What were you doing there?
Well, I was in public television in Boston. It's WGBH. And actually, I was working in what's called the Caption Center. This was way back in the 70s, late 70s. And we were taking the ABC Evening News each night and then breaking it down and captioning it for hearing impaired people. Nowadays, of course, that's all done in real time and closed captioning. But back then, it was open captioning that everyone could see. So it would be rebroadcast at 11. So all that labor that 5 of us did each night is now done, by an AI chip somewhere. It was a great experience. I did some radio work too. I produced some poetry tapes with great poems and music, but it was a lot of fun and all.
Yeah, lovely. And a barbershop quartet. Wow, that must have been great. I sing in a choir, so I can relate to that a bit.
It's a lot of fun. We started with one other guy from Yale and a couple other people. And our highlight was we ended up singing in the Massachusetts State House for then Governor Dukakis, who heard us on Nantucket and brought us over. So we were whisked up to Boston in the back of a police car, fortunately not being arrested, and sang for the guests at a function. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, amazing. And I want to ask you about scalloping, because obviously that features heavily in the novel. So how does one do that? What does that entail?
Well, there's a couple different ways. Commercial scalloping is done from a boat, and I actually did that for 3 years back in the early 80s when trying to earn some money in addition to writing. And what you do is from the boat, you throw out these dredges, they're called, 3 from each side. They're really like a metal bar with a net on it, and a metal chain on it to hold it down, and a weight to hold it down. And you pull it behind the boat for about, 10, 15 minutes, and then you stop and you pull the heavy dredges up into the boat and dump out everything onto what's called a culling board, which is where you separate the good scallops from the seaweed, from the fish, from the young scallops, called seed scallops. So that's commercial. Family scalloping, which I still do to this day, is a lot of fun, but you just walk in the water wearing a pair of waders or maybe a wetsuit, and you push a scallop rake in front of you. You have a pole about 10 feet long. There's like a mini dredge on the end of it. Again, a rectangle of steel with a net, and you push it along and you pick it up and you find whatever is good, and those good scallops you put into a basket that you tow behind you. So both of them are a lot of fun. I love doing commercial scalloping. It was great work to be out in the beautiful harbor. I love family scalloping. The only part I don't love is opening the scallops, which is pretty messy, but I love eating them, so it's all good.
Yeah, it's lovely. So they, when they're in the water, they have a shell either side, do they?
Yes, they have that ribbed shell that you've probably seen on some gasoline stations, or at least in the old days we did. And and what you eat is just the muscle inside. It's the abductor muscle technically, but it's actually called the eye when you're a scalloper, the eye of the scallops. And what you hope is that you have a large eye inside the scallop, because that means you get more weight from it as a commercial scalloper. And of course, the more weight, the better in terms of your price.
Yeah. And what about the coral? Are you a fan of the coral?
I love coral, and I love conch and all other. We have lots of clams too. There's a lot of wonderful shellfish life in the islands off of Northeast and off of New England. They all are a little different, but they all purify the water, and they produce wonderful protein and just add so much to the life.
Yeah, lovely. So let's talk about your novel then, All That Smoulders. Why did you want to venture out for your first murder mystery?
Yes. Well, the real impetus was in honor of my mother, Catherine, who was a huge Agatha Christie fan. I felt like I'd never given enough attention to mysteries in my life. Of course, I'd read one from now and then, as many of us do. But I decided, she'd been gone from this world about 10 years. I decided in honor of her, I would find out about Agatha Christie and try to write a book that I thought she might have loved. So I read a baker's dozen of Agatha Christie's novels, read 13, and I looked for the various tricks and word uses that she had. For instance, she usually has 5 to 7 suspects in her mystery novels, each of whom has a possible motive and a means of committing the crime. And she usually embeds a few seemingly everyday details into the story, and later you realize, aha, that was what I missed. That was the clue to the whole thing. So I had a lot of fun learning that and then incorporating it into a story set, of course, not in merry old England, but on a little island off the coast of New England.
Nice. And you yourself live on an island with your family and have done for many years. What's it like being on an island, and why is it a good setting for a murder mystery, do you think?
Well, great question. We love living on an island. We feel there's a real sense of community. We have many close friends. What makes it great about a mystery novel, there's a couple things. One is it's an enclosed environment, and Agatha Christie often did that too, whether it be a train or a boat or a little community, even an island in a few of her mysteries. So an enclosed community makes it feel more claustrophobic and maybe a little bit intense. But second of all, one thing I know about island life is that everyone thinks they know everything about everyone else, but there are the deep secrets that they don't know. Mm-hmm. So that tension adds to the intrigue of it all. And finally, there's one other thing, at least on the islands of New England, there's this tension between interdependence. You all have to help each other. But also there's what we call a Yankee strain of independence, of I will do it my way. And those two things are often a tension, and that makes it interesting to deal with the people and the characters in a mystery novel.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about your main character, Peter Christie.
Yes, well, I wanted to have a main character who had two types of backstory. One was he was looking for redemption. He's messed up his life. He's been a reporter at the Boston Globe. He had an affair with a young intern. As a result, he lost his marriage. His wife left him. He lost his job, and he's looking to redeem himself both professionally and in his interpersonal relations. He comes to this little island where he's offered a job, and he comes thinking he wouldn't get involved with anyone, but right away falls for a local woman who's a ranger, like a conservationist. So anyway, that's part of the backstory. And so part of the story is Peter Christie trying to redeem himself, and in learning more about himself and revisiting his past, let's use the word trauma, that's not an overstatement, his past trauma that has led him to act so erratically. He will also open himself up to the sort of insight and intuition that may help him solve a mystery, a murder that comes along on the island very soon. The other backstory, which you might have mentioned in your opening, is that Peter Christie is fictionally, of course, but his great-great aunt is Agatha Christie, and there's a little backstory that explains all that. Because I read so much Agatha Christie and I loved her mind and her way of putting in clues and analyses, I wanted to have this main character somehow be related to her and be thinking in his own way that he is hearkening back to his great-great aunt and her brilliance and trying to invoke it as he tries to solve this mystery.
Yeah, lovely. Nice idea. And what about the setting? So it's set in 1980. Why did you want to set it then?
Well, I thought it was nice for this first mystery to go back to a pre-internet time, when life in some ways maybe was simpler. It's a time I remember well because my wife and I, and we had one child then, a baby. We had two more later. But when we moved there, it was a simpler, quieter island to live on, a lovely setting to write about, and to set a novel in. Ironically, when we moved there, the most popular bumper sticker, and this appears in the novel, but the most popular bumper sticker, you saw it on the back of most trucks and cars, was "It used to be nice on Nantucket." Now, this is 1980, 1981. Now, of course, in the year 2026, people look back on 1980 and say, oh, what a wonderful time that was on the island. It was less developed and all that. But it just shows that people always think there were better times in the past. Yeah. And I want to go back to that past and recreate it. And then that gave me time to build forward in the next two sequels I hope to write.
Oh, lovely. So you haven't started the sequel yet?
Well, I've started writing it, but it's not ready for publication. But it's been a lot of fun to revisit some of the same characters. I'm setting it 20 years later, the year 2000. Yeah, so that's been fun, but it's just getting going.
And is it kind of, I don't want to say easier, I understand it's not easy, but when you've already got the characters and you've already got the setting, you're not kind of starting from scratch in the same way, I guess. That's
exactly right. And one of the nicest things is to revisit people that feel like old friends. For instance, Peter Christie works with a detective who's much more literal-minded in the 1980 version, Detective McWayne, and he's sort of like an older father figure to him, and he appears 20 years later in this novel. So I felt like it was like an old friend I was revisiting. Same with his newspaper editor, Stephanie, who's a sort of no-nonsense person and very observant. She's back 20 years later. So revisiting old friends is a lot of fun. Of course, I had to come up with a whole new plot. Peter and Hattie maybe or may not be together. You don't know at the end of the first novel, so I don't want to talk about that. But there's a lot that's happened in 20 years. And what is the crisis now in the year 2000? In the 1980 novel, that's all that smolders, it's the murder of actually Hattie's grandfather. But in this new novel, it will be a whole different thing. Yeah. And where does the title come from, All That Smolders? Another wonderful question. So there are some literary clues that appear. One of them is a poem is found in the pocket of the murder victim, and the Detective McWayne, calls in Peter Christie because he's heard he's, quote, a literary guy, and asks him, what is this poem? And the poem begins, all that smolders isn't seen. It often lurks between. And it goes on for, it's just 8 lines, but it's a little tease to the people who are reading it, saying, I'm out here and you don't know who I am, and this is what I've done. So nice.
Well, if people want to read All That Smoulders, a mystery, it is available in all the usual places where you get your books from, be it online or your local bookshop. And it's by James Sulzer, who we've been chatting with today. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of today's book show. In the first hour, we were chatting with Jim Eldridge, Douglas Jackson and James Sulzer. In this hour, we're joined by S.J. Bennett, who was born in Yorkshire and travelled the world as an army child. She had a varied career before her debut novel was published at the age of 42. Since then, her books have won awards and been optioned for television. She was once asked to interview for the role of Assistant Private Secretary to the Queen and still considers it the job that got away. The Queen Who Came In From the Cold is the latest in Her Majesty the Queen Investigates series. I'm also chatting to Holly Gadaray, who's a multi-genre writer living in rural Ontario. Her acclaimed memoir of mixed race identity and mental illness, Muse, won the 2023 Canadian Book Club Award for non-fiction memoir. Her debut novel, The Unraveling of Oo, is about a sock puppet named Ecology Paul, which the character of Minu has a strong connection to. I'm also chatting to Gavin Taylor, a writer and artist inspired by the wildlife in his garden and a long-standing fascination with insects. Bertie Comes to Stay and Other Stories features a most unusual animal, a giant bumblebee the size of a sheepdog. Aimed at children aged 6 to 9, the stories combine humour and warmth with themes of kindness, inclusion, communication and understanding differences. And finally, on tonight's book show is Rashmi Surdeshpande. She's a neurodivergent children's author with an advocate for underrepresented voices in children's publishing. A former World Book Day author and book trust writer in residence, Rashmi has won a number of awards, including the Diverse Book Award. Harry Kumar, Ultimate Superstar, is a laugh-out-loud, doodle-packed diary series for 8+ readers. Harry is a 10-year-old and is 75% Indian, 25% French and 100% going to be a superstar. All he needs to make it big is a lucky break. And that is tonight's book show on Talk Radio Europe.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is S.J. Bennett, who was born in Yorkshire and travelled the world as an army child. She had a varied career before her first novel was published when she was 42. Since then, her books have won awards, been optioned for TV, and have been translated into over 20 languages. She was once asked to interview for the role of Assistant Private Secretary to the Queen and still considers it the job that got away. A curious royal watcher for many years, she lives in London, where she can often be found haunting its palaces, museums, galleries and libraries. She currently writes the Her Majesty the Queen Investigates series. She's with us on the book show to talk about the latest in that series called The Queen Who Came In From the Cold. It's 1961 and the Queen is planning her state visit to Italy aboard Britannia. Welcome to the book show, Sophia.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you with us. And what a lovely idea for a series. Where did it come from?
Well, my father was in the army and he worked with the Queen several times when I was growing up. And I knew that I had been writing for children and I wanted to write a detective series. And I just suddenly found myself thinking, wouldn't the Queen make a great detective? I mean, this was back in about 2018 and she was alive and well, because she had sort of natural curiosity. She was really interested in people and she had access to any kind of expert that she might ever want to consult. And she really knew what was going on in her palaces. So I just thought if anything went wrong in kind of the world around her, she would be the first person to spot it and do something about it. And as soon as I had the idea, I thought, I've got to write this story. It'd be such fun.
So how old is the Queen in your books?
To start with, I was going to make her an indeterminate age, but when I started writing The Windsor Knot, which is the first in the series, I just found myself writing it around her 90th birthday party in April in 2016. And then it became very, very specific. So in the first 3 books, they're all set in 2016. And it became a kind of game to set my murder investigations around what she was really doing. And you can find that out pretty easily, what her public engagements were. So if she was meeting the Bishop of Leicester and Michael Gove one day, which she actually was doing, then she does that in the book. And then when she's got a little bit of time off, she quietly investigates murders that happen round and about her.
Lovely. So this one's really going back in time a bit then, back to the 60s.
So the latest one does, yes. After the first 3, I set one in 1957, and then The Queen Who Came In From the Cold is my kind of James Bond spy one, set in 1961, just as they were thinking about making the first James Bond film, and people are reading Thunderball, and John le Carré's first book is about to come out. So yes, there's a kind of spy feel to this one, and it's set on the royal train and a little bit on the royal yacht. So there's some travelling involved, which was really fun to research as well.
Yes. And when you're writing about someone who, I know she's been dead for a few years now, but when you were writing the books, and even now, because it's still been quite recently that she passed, is it difficult trying to make sure you get her right? Because obviously there'll be other people who are lovers of the Queen and the royal family, and people are quick to go, oh no, she wouldn't say that and she's not like that. You know, do you spend a lot of time really trying to make her character as authentic as possible?
Well, I spent a year before I wrote a word of The Windsor Knot, really, trying to do that. Not looking at any imitations of her at all, but very much watching original interviews. And I've followed her, most of my life, as a lot of people have, and coming up with what she might have been like with Prince Philip behind the scenes, and at that point, an elderly couple who'd lived with each other for a long time. And once I got into the voice, as I said, it took me ages, but once I got into it, then it became quite easy. And I have to say, I don't get the criticism of, oh, you haven't got her right. I very much get that, oh my goodness, you got her so right, which is lovely. And recently, I gave a talk at the library near Windsor Castle, and literally, I think half the audience worked at the castle. And they'd all met all the members of the royal family, and a lot of them are fans of the series. And that was really, really lovely to know.
Yes, lovely. You've obviously got her right, which is lovely for you. And with regards to this book, then, tell us about the different settings, the train and the yacht and everything.
My editor said, please, can you set a mystery on a train? Because there, it's a thing in mystery stories. There are so many. And I thought, yeah, that'd be pretty straightforward. The royal train was a really big deal. The Queen used it to travel around the country. But actually, the thing about train mysteries is usually they're a mystery because you don't know who you're going to be in a carriage with, and it's kind of strangers meeting, but that doesn't happen on the royal train. So in this one, somebody sees what looks like it might be a murder happening from the train, and we take it from there. But it was really fun to research the train itself. The Queen had her bathtub, which had been her father's carriage, and it had a little red line on it. You filled it up with water to the red line so that it didn't slosh around too much going around corners. And yeah, it was lovely to sort of hear about the different carriages. And they were old. I mean, they were her grandparents, and they went back for 50, 60, 70 years because, she didn't throw things away when she didn't need to. So yeah, it was really fun researching all of that. And then even more fun, the second half of the book moves onto the Royal Yacht Britannia sailing around Italy. And obviously that was gorgeous to research because, yeah, I mean, everybody who set foot on Britannia absolutely loved it. It was a really amazing yacht, which I visited up in Edinburgh. And so it was really fun imagining the Queen in the 60s, visiting the Pope in Rome, going up to Venice and visiting Venice from the yacht. And then setting a murder mystery around that.
Yes, lovely. So you have an assistant private secretary in the story, don't you, Joan? Tell us about her.
Yeah, Joan McGraw is based on both my grandmothers, really, who were the right sort of age to have been working during the Second World War. They didn't work at Bletchley Park, but Joan does. And the Queen hires her in the late 50s because Joan did some really brave, interesting things in the war, but things didn't go well for her afterwards, and she ended up as a typist at Buckingham Palace. And the Queen encounters her there and sees what an interesting person she is. Photographic memory. She's a linguist. She's good at getting around and talking to people. And so she and the Queen become firm friends. You know, they're both women in a man's world, and they come to rely very much on each other. Joan's a working class Irish woman, really. Her father is a college porter at a Cambridge college, who is based slightly on a very famous porter at a college that I was at for a while. Joan can go to all the places that the Queen can't and find out the things that the Queen can't be seen to be investigating. Because the thing about my stories is, how come we don't know the Queen was a great crime solver? The answer being that the Queen always lets somebody else take the credit for the crime solving, and that becomes part of the story as well. How is she going to do it, and who's going to take the credit for it in the end?
Oh, lovely. So I have to ask you about your experience then, when I mentioned in the introduction, asked to interview for the role of assistant private secretary to the Queen. So how far did you get with that? How did it come about?
Well, if I got any further, my next interview would have been a final interview with the Queen herself. So I got quite close. It was in the days. This is back in the early 90s. So it was back in the day when somebody would sort of give you a tap on the shoulder and say, "There's this job. Are you interested?" And I thought, wow, am I interested? Of course I'm interested. And I was a linguist too, and the idea of travelling around with the Queen sounded amazing. So, the interview was in Buckingham Palace, and you think, oh, there's a side door that you go through. But basically, I went through the right-hand gate of the forecourt that you see when you're standing in front of it, and walked across the forecourt where they do the changing of the guard, which just felt surreal. And I remember thinking, my skirt's too short, because I had this above-the-knee interview skirt on, and I thought this is not going to go well. And then everyone inside was really charming, and I interviewed with the private secretary and the keeper of the Privy Purse, who's the guy in charge of the finances. And I make fun of these men not these particular men, but those roles in my books. The Queen kind of has to get around them a lot of the time because they're trying to protect her from things that she needs to know. But the actual men that I met were intelligent and charming and really nice. And I do feel mean making them the butt of the joke in the books a bit. But in Joan's world, they're known, Prince Philip calls them the men in moustaches. And they're sort of a generation older and, constantly trying to keep the young Queen away from trouble. And she's constantly sort of moving towards it and working out what to do about it.
Yes. And what kind of things did they ask you? I mean, how did the interview go?
I think, I was in my late 20s, I think, or early 30s. And for them, that was very young to be interviewing. So the job was assistant private secretary. So the Queen has her private secretary, and he has somebody helping him out and managing the logistics of the Queen's life. But it does mean you have to go into, large rooms full of ambassadors and who knows what, and presidents, and kind of marshal them around and tell them what to do. And so they were trying to find out whether I would be able to do that and whether I'd be able to sort of manage the sort of complexities of the job. And I just remember looking around and thinking, oh, this is such a beautiful Georgian room, and isn't the furniture amazing? And I think my skirt's too short. And in the end, they did give the job to somebody older than me. So I have all my life blamed the skirt for me not getting that job. But if I'd got it, then I wouldn't have been able to write the series, because I'm sure there are lots of NDAs that you have to sign when you do that kind of thing. Yes. But as it is, I can kind of make it up.
Yeah, lovely. What an amazing experience. And nice that you've that it's become this lovely writing career as well and turned into a whole series.
It's been really fun. fun. I mean, it was very hard, obviously, in 2022 when the Queen died. And I honestly thought I'd have at least 10 years of writing the series before she did die, because her mother lived, beyond 100 and she had better health care and she seemed really well. So it was an awful, horrible shock that summer. And then a lot of people thought that I would stop writing then, but actually I'd always planned to go back in time. And I really wanted to capture those years when the Queen was traveling a lot and going to America and Australia and Canada and just all over the place. And kind of flying the flag. And I just capture what it used to be like to have a world leader who people looked up to and trusted and, respected what they had to say, and who, didn't always get it right, but certainly tried to be of service. Yeah, I wanted to capture that feeling of being able to trust the people in power. It sort of feels more and more distant these days, but a lot of people read the series for a little bit of escapism, and that's part of it, really.
Yes, it does. It seems a long time since that's been normal or something that we could relate to, doesn't it? Looking up to world leaders. They should be people that we look up to and that we can trust and we value what they say. But yes, not so much these days, sadly.
Not so much these days. Most of my life that was true. I mean, I thought Mark Carney of Canada made a fantastic speech recently, and his oratory was wonderful at Davos. And yes, it was very, very meaningful. And I've seen commentary on it recently saying that used to be quite normal. And now it absolutely stood out because it's not normal at all anymore.
Yes. Well, if people want to get a copy of The Queen Who Came In From the Cold, it's available in all the usual places where you get your books from, either online or your local bookshop. And it's by S.J. Bennett, who we've been chatting with today. Sophia, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Holly Cadaret. She's a multi-genre writer living in rural Ontario. Fuse, her acclaimed memoir of mixed-race identity and mental illness, was published in 2021 and won the 2023 Canadian Book Club Award for non-fiction memoir. Her short fiction collection, Widow Fantasies, came out in 2024 and is a finalist for the 2025 Toronto Book Awards. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her debut novel, The Unraveling of Oo. It looks at the role of magical realism in processing trauma and identity. Welcome to the Book Show, Holly.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
It's great to have you with us. And congratulations. How does it feel to have your debut novel out?
It is such a different experience than any other genre. Poetry, there's a beautiful poetry community in Canada and the world, and they care, but it doesn't have the reach that, long form fiction has. My short fiction was actually flash fiction, so it's even more niche than short fiction. And my debut was a memoir. So memoir can do well if you're like a famous celebrity person, but I wasn't, and it was my first book. So a novel being my fourth book has been a completely different experience because I'm getting like advanced attention and people are actually reading it on NetGalley and places, and it's wild for me.
Oh, that's nice. It must feel good though.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but the more people read it, the more opinions you get. And I truly believe we were not meant to hear so many people's opinions.
So tell me a little bit about the background to the story and the inspiration behind it.
Absolutely. So this novel was written because the publisher of my short fiction collection, Widow Fantasies, flash fiction, said he gave me a compliment but I interpreted it as a direct challenge. I think it's just because anytime a man says something to me, I'm automatically like, how dare you? But he said that he would love to see what I did with a longer form. And I interpreted that very nice compliment as a direct challenge, and saying that implying I could not write a longer form because I never had. And so I decided I was going to write a novel, which had never been something that I was thinking about doing. I was very happy writing poetry and short fiction and personal essays. Novels were just out of my reach. But So I decided to write one, and I had no idea what I was going to write it about, but I was in the throes of motherhood. I still am, but at the time I had even younger children, and we were making sock puppet crafts all the time. And I was thinking about, as my daughters in particular get older, the ways in which women uphold the patriarchy. I thought about the way that I was raised and the internalized misogyny and shame I felt about my body. I was also reading Adele Wiseman's beautiful memoir of creativity and motherhood called Old Woman at Play, which discusses, among other things, her mother's prolific doll making. And all of these thoughts were just whirling around in my head, and the confluence ended up being this novel.
Wow. So where did you start? There's a lot of kind of different subjects and different perspectives there. How did you go about planning the novel and the exact story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And it wasn't very easy, because while I wrote this book in less than a year, which I've never written a book that quickly before, I actually didn't know what I was doing. And I was approaching it the way that I'd approach a poem, which was with no clear idea of what I was doing or map. And then a very dear friend of mine, who also happens to be the acclaimed Canadian writer, Lucy M. Black, she writes incredible historical fiction. She said to me that I really needed to do a plot outline. And I was like, no, that it doesn't align with my creative practice. And she's like, get over yourself. If you're going to write a novel, you really need to know where you're going, or at least have a rough idea of what you're trying to do. And so very reluctantly, after struggling for a few weeks, I did this map, and all I did was jot down a few ideas on each chapter and what I was trying to explore. And I knew exactly where I was going. I knew what I want the last scene to be from fairly early on. So I did that, and Lucy was right. It worked, and I finished it quite quickly because I knew where I was going, even though things changed as I went and characters surprised me. The main character of this novel, the protagonist, is a sock puppet named Ecology Paul. And at first there were other perspectives in the book, but by the end it was only the sock. So in this novel, you only have the sock talking. You do not hear from the person directly who the sock is attached to.
Wow, interesting. So tell us about Ecology Paul.
Yeah, I'm so weirdly attached to this little puppet. I actually made a prototype who I spoke with for a year, and it was such a wonderful and weird, and for all four of my children, humiliating experience to have me do this. I really did it at first just from a perspective of choreography. What I mean is, how would you talk to a puppet? What would you do? How would you look at each other? How would the puppet interact with other things and other people? And then I think that's how the voice of the puppet just began to overtake everything else, because it's a very consuming thing to live in this world with this piled and pummeled little friend. So Ecology Paul is Minu's conduit. Minu is the person who is behind Ecology Paul, through which she sees the world and tries to make sense of her life and who she is. And Ecology Paul is a safety net. It's a block between her and the immensity of her feelings and her fear. So it's really, I think it's an interesting conceit, but I also think that I'm not sure I'm that original, because puppets have been used, for centuries to talk about things that people find too difficult to talk about.
Yeah. So how do you manage to try and get inside the mind of a puppet, and how is he understanding what Minu is going through and things?
Yeah. I think going inside the mind of a puppet was fairly easy for me. I probably feel like a puppet most days. So the puppet is just such a charming, affable, kind being that I approached the puppet the way I'd approach the very best that I would hope for myself. So Ecology Paul is probably the closest character to me in the book, because we do meet other characters through the eyes of the puppet. But I'm not very close to Minu. Her experience of the world is not how I have experienced the world. I did not get pregnant in Iran when I was 14. I was not exiled to Canada. But the puppet embodies everything I wish I could be. I wish I could be kinder. I wish I could be more playful and have more fun and not be weighed down by everything. I wish I could be more instantaneously understanding of things. Now, Ecology Paul is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the puppet is, for me, just this embodiment of hope and how I wish more of us treated ourselves, and how I wish our internal voices, at least my internal voice, would be more often, because my internal voice with me is quite cruel and quite critical. And of course, that's not very helpful.
Oh, wow, it's really interesting hearing you talking about Ecology Paul in such a powerful way when he's a sock puppet. I mean, it's amazing the power that he seems to have.
It's a lot. In fact, when we were writing this book, like the puppet was writing it with me. Woo! When I was writing this book, at first my kids found the puppet quite charming and silly. Especially my older two. My younger two weren't bothered by the puppet at the end, but the older two, who are now teenagers, at first thought, oh, silly mummy, like, what's she doing? But by the end, we're actually quite mortified about what was happening with me talking to this puppet. And when friends came over, they made me put the puppet away, which was really informative, because at first I had Minu's daughter be fine with the puppet and be understanding, more like Minu's husband, Atanas, is, like, who is trying to love her above this strange relationship she has. But then when I realized the way that teenagers would actually act, and that, kids might find the puppet amusing when they're young, but that would end pretty soon when they get older and everything you do starts to embarrass them. So that really helped informed the way that Roya, Minu's daughter, reacted, or her perspective of the puppet changed and her feelings of the puppet changed. So yeah, it was quite intense. And I even had a person who was doing a little photo shoot with me in the puppet say to me that it was amazing. As soon as I put the sock puppet on my hand, I started smiling. I was really nervous and I didn't want to be there. And then as soon as Ecology Paul was with me, I started beaming, and I was like, God, this is a sick dependency.
Wow, that's really interesting. And what about the title, The Unraveling of U? What does that mean?
Yeah, so U is the Farsi pronoun for he and she. So in the Farsi language, the language that the Iranian people speak, although it is spoke other places, there is no separate pronoun for he or she. It is just U. There is a they, a word for they, but this is just the gender neutral pronoun for he and she.
Okay, interesting. Would you know why you called it that, where it came from?
Yeah, so it's kind of trying to, this is definitely a queer novel. So Minu has a lot of repression and does not realize she is not straight, only because I know a lot of women feel this way. It was absolutely the same with me, is that when you've been taught to hate your body enough, it would never occur to you to find attractive or desirable a body like yours. So while Minu loves her husband very much and finds him desirable, she's not straight, but she doesn't know how to, negotiate that in her head or interpret it. So I was interested in playing with those themes, as well as the themes of just humanity over gender, and also obviously the separation between Ecology Paul and Minu, and separating those things. Although Ecology Paul does not see itself as necessarily a he or a she, there's a scene in the book where he corrects, or see, I just did it, where it corrects a little boy who assumed that it was a he, but on the other hand, the puppet doesn't really care either. It's a confluence of two things. It's a confluence of Minu and the puppet. So it's really up to reader interpretation. I had a recent review where somebody said that the puppet made them feel uneasy all the time. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting interpretation. I even went to the puppet and gave it a hug and said, I'm sorry, it's not you, it's them.
So who have you written the book for, would you say?
It's dedicated to the puppet. The dedication is to EP, Ecology Paul, which, if I couldn't have mortified my children more, that definitely did it. But I said I dedicated the previous 3 books to you guys. I think you could take a back seat for this one. But EP, Ecology Paul, it's written for myself. So Ecology Paul is an extension of me, and it is to Ecology Paul, but I think it's to me. It's to that spark of hope and gentleness in all of us that we have for ourselves and each other. So yes, it's for the puppet, but the puppet is, I understand the puppet is not real. Obviously, after this conversation, it may not be obvious to listeners. I understand the puppet's not real, but I know the puppet's not real. It's really just to the hope and kindness and warmth and compassion that I think most of us have the potential to feel for ourselves and other people. And in this world today, I think we need that more than ever.
Yeah. And is it an adult novel, would you say?
Absolutely. There is even an intimate scene with the puppet, which my editor made me take from X down to about PG-13.
The mind boggles.
Yeah. She was just like, oh, this made me blush. There's nothing else in this novel like this. And then suddenly you spring this on us. Could you take it down a few notches? I was like, sure. I think I've been reading a lot of smut lately, and it made its way into my book. So it is not for children.
Okay, perfect. Well, if people want to get a copy of The Unraveling of Oo, it's out now. It's available wherever you buy your books from, and it's by Holly Gadre, who we've been chatting with. Holly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
This is Talk Radio Europe.
Online at TRE.radio.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
You're listening to The Book Show with Hannah Murray on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Gavin Taylor. He's a writer and artist. Having recently retired from a long career doing boring things with computers, he decided to pursue something more interesting and fulfilling. Inspired by the wildlife in his garden and a long-standing fascination with insects, Gavin wanted to create stories that were funny and adventurous, but also gentle and thoughtful. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about Bertie Comes to Stay and other stories, which features a most unusual animal, a giant bumblebee the size of a sheepdog. The book follows the story's narrator, Katie, and her family after they adopt Bertie from an animal rescue centre. Welcome to the Book Show, Gavin.
Hello there. How exciting to be on the radio talking about my book.
Oh, it's lovely to have you with us. And what a lovely idea. Where did it all come from?
Well, the idea of the giant bee, really, it came because I was doing some drawings of bees. I'm quite into painting and drawing. That's a hobby of mine as well. And there are lots of bees and dragonflies and other critters in the garden. And I was doing some quite detailed drawings of bees. And to get more detail in, the drawings themselves became bigger and bigger and bigger, just so I could squash the detail in. And this kind of put the idea in my mind, well, what if bees themselves were actually bigger than they are? What if they were the size of hamsters or cats or even dogs, and that kind of led me on to the idea of, well, what would it be like if you had one in your house? Instead of a dog, you adopted a giant bee. How would that go? And how, what kind of crazy chaos would ensue from that situation?
Nice. So tell us about the character of Bertie.
So Bertie is a white-tailed bumblebee, and he is just a regular, ordinary bee, except he's enormous. He's the size of a sheepdog, a border collie. And there's no real explanation in the book of how he came to be this size, or why there should be a giant bee in the world. And that's kind of an important part of the story or the background. I think that it's always a bit of a mystery. It's never quite explained. The family just adopt him from an animal rescue centre. So they go along to this animal rescue centre looking for, a regular pet, a cat, a dog, or a rabbit. The dad wants to adopt a snake because he's a bit of a rascal and he wants a slightly unusual pet. But there in a side room is this enormous bee. which nobody has any idea where it came from. It just flew in through the door one day, and they end up adopting it and taking it home as a pet. And really, the stories follow from there. It's about them adapting to him. They name him Bertie. And it's about them working out, well, how on earth do we live with a strange animal like this? And obviously he has to adapt to them because, he's just a bee and he's adapting to living in a human home. So obviously then there's all kinds of adventures and misadventures that they have along the way.
And the book has 4 stories in it that are all connected.
That's right. So they are 4 separate stories, but they flow through. And the idea is that they're essentially, it's the right length for a bedtime story. So part of the inspiration behind this was that, I've got 2 grown-up sons now, and I remember with, great fondness reading bedtime stories to them when they were little. So I wanted to write stories which were suitable for that. So, an adult can read each story in round about 10 minutes. Or 15, 20 by the time the kids have asked loads of questions. But that was the idea. They're essentially, it's a collection of 4 bedtime stories, really.
Okay. And what happens in all of this? Don't give too much away, but tell us a bit about what happens in each story.
Well, once they've got Bertie home and they've initially got around the shock and adapting to having this creature, they discover that most of the time he's a very, very gentle and easygoing and docile creature, except sometimes he can be very, very chaotic and he's very unpredictable and he can switch between one state and another. And they have to kind of work out how to control this. And there's a grumpy neighbor. So there's an antagonist in this story, Mr. Hector, and he's the neighbor who lives next door. And he really doesn't like the idea of living next door to this unusual creature because he doesn't even like children. He doesn't like noise or chaos. And this is causing him to get even grumpier than usual. So he's constantly trying to get rid of Bertie, and they're trying to adapt to Bertie's unusual lifestyle. And turns out he's very good at getting into things. He's good at undoing handles and locks, and he gets into the icing sugar in the cupboard because he's obviously, as a bee, he loves sugar and he's constantly looking for sugary treats. That's what he lives on, and he's trying to get cans of fizzy drink, which send him absolutely crazy. So they have to try and find a way to adapt to this bee who is constantly after sugar and constantly causing chaos in the household and beyond.
Mm-hmm. And a key element of the stories is Bumblebee sign language. What's that about?
Yes. So I'd written the first 2 stories. But the first one is essentially when Bertie comes home and they adapt to him in the home. The second one, he turns up at the school, and obviously children in the school are tremendously excited, a little bit scared, as you would be. You can imagine if a child is confronted by an enormous bee. Well, actually, that could be quite a scary thing. So I'm trying to, in the book, I'm trying to portray bees as friendly and, not scary. I don't want children to be frightened of Bertie. But yeah, you imagine you're confronted with this enormous insect. Some of the children are scared. Some of them are excited. But of course, when he gets into the school, he causes absolute chaos and mayhem until they manage to calm him down. And the family realize, well, we've got to control him in some way. We can't cage him in. We don't want to, put a lead on him or build a cage for him. But in some way, we have to bring some sort of order here. So they try to train him. And of course, how do you train a bumblebee, right? There's no manual for that. You can't train them like a dog. They try to take him to dog training sessions, and that just doesn't work at all. He just does not respond to commands. Again, causes mayhem in the dog training school. So they're almost at their wits' end. And then one of the characters, James, so James is a friend of Katie, the narrator, and he's a very, very serious, very geeky child, but he knows BSL, British Sign Language, which he's learnt because his aunt is deaf. So he's learnt that in order to communicate with her. And he tries this out on Bertie, and lo and behold, they are able to form a very basic kind of communication because he's able to pick up on some of these signs. Obviously, he can't do the signs properly because he hasn't got hands, he hasn't got fingers, but he has got 6 legs and 2 antennae, and they're able to adapt BSL into what they call BBSL, Bumblebee Sign Language. So this becomes a kind of element of the book in the way that they can communicate with Bertie, because I felt it kind of they needed some way to actually have some communication with him, and that was my idea of how they could do it without him being, a talking bee. I didn't want him to be a talking anthropomorphic animal, but at the same time I felt there needed to be some way that the humans could communicate with him. Yeah, great idea. So did you have to learn a little bit of sign language for it to make a bit of sense? I did. I learned a few basic signs. I wouldn't say that I can communicate in sign language, but yes, I did learn a few basic signs of BSL. Great. And I've kind of adapted those. So how would a bee do that? If you can't make that sign with your fingers, well, how would he use his legs and his antennae and the things he's got to make a similar sign? Clever. So you're already putting together a second volume, is that right? Bernie Goes Camping and Other Stories. That's right. Yes. So yeah. So Bertie Goes Camping is and Other Stories is the second volume. So yeah, I'm working on that at the moment, and a lot of the original characters will come back and introduce some new characters as well. So Mr. Hector the Grumpy Neighbour, who actually at one point tries to kidnap Bertie, although Bertie escapes, but so he's coming back in the second book, and there'll be a whole host of other characters as well. Great. And do you do a lot of planning with your books? Is it all kind of clearly marked out before you start writing, or do you just write and see what happens? It's not really. It's a lot more spontaneous than that. Yes, I guess at a certain point I have to write down a plan and write to it. But yeah, it's more spontaneous, and I just inspired by different ideas and different things that I see. The idea of the camping came about as I'm very involved in the scouting movement. I've been a scout leader for most of my adult life, and obviously I wanted, Bertie to have that kind of experience. So I thought, wait, what if he goes on a camp with a young adventurers club, and what would he do there, and how could he adapt to that, and how could the children learn from him and he learn from them? So it's those kinds of inspirations, but yeah, generally not very strictly planned. And why have you written the books as separate stories as opposed to one full-length story? I think it comes down to this idea of there being individual bedtime stories, that can be read in isolation. They do flow through. There's a progression to them, but the idea is that each one possibly later on could be published as a separate story in a different edition. But they're initially, I guess, meant to be read by parents to children, one at a time. So I guess the sweet spot of age is about 6 to 9 years old. Mm-hmm. So I would think probably the younger ones, the parents I expect reading to them and explaining the stories. The older ones are beginning, this is for young beginning readers, and maybe they're then beginning to read the stories themselves. So that's the idea, that it's in digestible chunks, a story that you can read, as a whole at once, and then you can return to the next one. Yeah, nice idea. Well, if people want to get a copy of Bertie Comes to Stay and Other Stories, it's available on our website, TRE.radio, in the bookshop section, and it's by Gavin Taylor, who we've been chatting with today. Gavin, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you very much. It's been great.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Rashmi Sardeshpande. She's a neurodivergent children's author and an advocate for underrepresented voices in children's publishing. A former World Book Day author and Book Trust writer in residence, Rashmi has won a number of awards, including the Diverse Book Awards and the Society of Authors Queen's Knickers Award, which celebrates outstanding picture books. Her factual book, Good News, was shortlisted for the Blue Peter Book Awards, and her latest Amazing Asia won the Children's Choice at the School Library Association's Information Book Awards. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her latest book, Hari Kumar, Ultimate Superstar. It's a laugh-out-loud, doodle-packed diary series for 8+ readers. Hari Kumar is 10 years old. He's 75% Indian, 25% French, and 100% going to be a superstar. All he needs to make it big is a lucky break. Welcome to the Book Show, Rashmi.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. And gosh, all those awards and everything, really impressive. How long have you been writing for?
I think I've been writing all my life, but I've been published for coming up to 7 years now. But everything's kind of just happened really quickly for me. I've been very lucky in the doors that have opened, kind of being in the right place at the right time, I think. And I couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's great. And what made you want to write books for children?
So I took the scenic route into writing. I was a lawyer before I became a children's writer. And I did love my job, actually. I was one of those rare, very strange people who loved being a corporate lawyer. But I wanted something that's more creative and flexible. And when I had my 2 children and we were reading lots, I discovered how much more diverse children's books are today. I fell back in love with writing. There was a competition that I came across, and I don't know what my imposter syndrome was doing that day, because I just decided to apply. It was a competition at Penguin Random House looking for new underrepresented writers. I sent in a story, and they loved it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Oh, wow. It was obviously meant to be.
Yes.
So how do you come up with the ideas? Because even though they're children's books, most of the ones we've talked about, they're different stories, different characters. Have you got a book of ideas or?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know what? Ideas for me come from everywhere. My brain is, in any case, an explosion of ideas. I'm late diagnosed autistic with ADHD, and I think it's that kind of ADHD trait of just having so much going on in my head. But that manifests itself so beautifully in writing, because I love reading all kinds of things. I think it makes sense that I end up creating all kinds of books for all kinds of readers, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think the ideas come from my love of things in the world. I follow my interests because I can't do it any other way. And those interests turn into books.
Oh, great. So tell us about your character of Hari Kumar.
Sure. So Hari, like me, is autistic. He has ADHD. He's a cheeky and smart South Asian kid with some really big feelings and some very big Bollywood dreams. And Bollywood, of course, is the Indian movie business based in Mumbai, something I loved growing up. So it was fun creating this character who just dreams of being a star, and he sees his whole life like a movie. And in that movie, he is absolutely the star.
And do we meet his family and friends and things in the book?
We do. I mean, he was the first character I came up with, but I had a lot of fun building this whole cast out around him. We've got his Indian grandparents, we've got his mammy, his French grandma, and across the series, we'll see them kind of come into the story and spend more time in Hari's world. He's got his best friends, Lily and Raheem, at school. He's sort of surrounded by interesting characters. And supportive, wonderful people. His parents are really lovely, and they understand him. And of course, his dreams can take him off in a direction sometimes that he needs to kind of be pulled back, just sort of gently pulled back in. And I think his family and friends, that whole cast around him, help to do that.
Yeah. And why did you make him partly French?
Do you know what? That was a nod to a fantastic French teacher that I had growing up. I think the first teacher who really just fully believed in me. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you meet someone who just changes your trajectory because they believe in you so completely. And I never saw myself as someone who could really, really excel in things until I met this teacher. And that's interesting to me. So me putting that little splash of French in the book was my thank you to this teacher, because I think that teacher contributed a lot to where I am today without even knowing it.
Oh, that's really nice, really special. It's amazing, isn't it, the impact that teachers can have on us, both positively and negatively. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So have you been in touch with the teacher? Do they know that you've done this for them?
I was in touch with them a while back. I mean, it's decades ago that I was in school now, but I was thinking of letting them know about this book, if they're still around, of course, because that's another thing. I hope I do get to tell them.
Yes, that would be nice too. So is this going to be a series, or are they all standalone books?
Yes, it's going to be a series. There are 3 scheduled in so far. The next book 2, comes out in August, and that one's based around sports day. So the first book is built around this idea of a school film competition, which is Harry's big opportunity to shine, to make a name for himself, and hopefully get on the ladder towards his dream of being a Bollywood star. The second book is focused around sports day, and I did that because actually those words, sports day, still send a shiver down my spine. I was terrible at sport. I was just useless. My poor PE teachers. But yeah, you say sports day or you say PE teacher, and I still shiver. So it's quite funny kind of writing a book sort of centered around this whole thing, which for a lot of kids, is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And for some of us is sort of potentially the toughest day of the year.
So is Harry good at sports?
No, he's not. He says the way he describes it is, I have more brains and good looks than being sporty, and that's kids are different. But he's determined to help his friend because she is now a house rep. Is one of his best friends, and she wants their house to win this year because they've never won, and she's determined. And because he's a good friend, ultimately, he loves himself, but he's got a big heart, Harry. And so he decides he's going to go all out against all the odds and try and help her.
Oh, nice. So do we like Harry? Is the idea that he's a lovable character?
Yes, my friend Nisrana Farouk, who writes beautiful middle grade books, she actually called him a lovable scamp. I think that really sums him up, actually. I think he is a lovable scamp. He's sort of a character that he's big-hearted, actually. Even though he loves himself, he's so big-hearted and generous about the people around him. He respects other people for the amazing things that they can do. It's not that, it's not either or. You don't have to be this very soft, gentle character that is very nervous about the world, but then has a big heart. You can actually be a big-hearted person who is also quite a big character on the stage yourself. And I kind of wanted to show that with Harry. So yes, we do love him. He makes bad choices. I'm hoping readers will read this going, Harry, no, don't, But I'm hoping they'll love him. They do already, which is great.
Yeah. And when you're writing books for kids, do you have to do a bit of research into the language that you can use, the kind of words that you can use to make it age appropriate?
Yes, I think there is a degree of that. And it's quite interesting with sort of slang, Gen Alpha and Gen Z and so on. We have to be careful in publishing because we want these books to last for a long time. So there's always a conversation about, is this a phrase that's going to endure, or should we actually not use the very, very, very current language and use something that's sort of more classic? It's all of this sort of tension between wanting to sound very much like children today, but then making sure that language lasts. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, because the slang words that we used when we were growing up are very different to what kids use now. And so often you hear kids saying things and it's like, what does that mean? What?
Exactly.
Okay, well, if people want to get a copy of Harry Kumar, Ultimate Superstar, it's available now on our website, tre.radio, in the bookshop section, and it's by Rashmi Sardeshpande, who we've been chatting with today. Rashmi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
The Book Programme, presented by Hannah Murray.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this program, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.